We have ventured far within the verdant forests of Jaesha, facing the many wild dangers and creatures that the land and its inhabitants have to offer. Forging past the guard at the gate, we move down a set of stairs. Vines and mold cover every corner as the musty air fills our lungs. We make our way deeper. On the bottom floor of the partially collapsed dungeon, in the singularly lit cell, lays a man. A man who we have been trying to find since we first arrived on the shores near Ward 13. Andrew Ford, the founder of Ward 13. As we will come to learn, Ford's life has been one of both great triumph and great sorrow. A varied tapestry of events that would eventually lead to both his and our own fates. In his younger days, during his military years, Ford was a dedicated soldier and a reliable captain. Having shown his skill for leadership, he was eventually assigned to oversee part of a new government-run experiment group dedicated to studying and understanding the power and nature of strange red crystals which had been found deep within the mantle of the Earth. Under his leadership, and with the direct involvement of brilliant scientists such as Dr. Leto and Dr. Hosgard, the Ward Project made great strides towards becoming one of the most important discoveries that mankind could conceive. Yet, as with so many stories within our histories, the reach of man would exceed his grasp, and the eventual outcome would be disaster. During the Root's invasion of the Wards and the Atoll, Ford managed to open a path between the crystals and led a group of his people into Ward 13. Here he created a small haven for those that remained, sealing away the base from the outside world and using what resources they could to survive. Over the years, the Ward settled into a modicum of normality. People grew to understand the new life that was set before them, and the strong resilience of humanity kept them alive. Despite his held guilt for the events that led to Earth's invasion, Ford found himself as part of a community, no longer simply a commander, but a true leader to his people. Ford felt great responsibility for those that he had saved and for his planet as a whole. While he managed the day-to-day of Ward 13, Ford found himself growing ever closer to one of his subordinates. Indeed, in a time of cruelty and chaos, where every day was a struggle for survival, Ford found hope and love. Here's where he met the woman who would one day become his wife. In Evelyn's journal, which we find within Ward 13, we learn of how the two met. It was Evelyn who made the first move, and despite some initial hesitation, they soon found themselves permanently tethered to one another. Soon, they married, and from their love came new life. The first of a new generation of people born in a world ravaged by the Root. Together they had a daughter, whom they named Nadine Ford. As the years passed, life carried onward. The Root settled into the planet, and the people of Ward 13 did the best they could to survive. Andrew and Evelyn were happy. They had found a reason to live in a time of pure hardship. Their family was small, but filled with love. Nadine grew and learned to survive, guided by her parents. One can imagine that it would have been somewhat easier for her, having known only this world. She had no real idea of what the Earth was like before the invasion. Evelyn too began to learn and grow with the passing years. Powers that had manifested in her youth started to overwhelm her. She began to have dreams which linked her to the singular consciousness of the species, her mind melding with that of the Root as she slept, manifesting into visions and dreams. Evelyn became one with the Root during these times, seeing and feeling all that they did. Slowly the visions became more severe and intense. She witnessed her body committing gruesome acts against her own kind, killing friends and allies, setting ambushes for her people and bringing focused destruction onto what she held most dear. As fear and panic gripped her tightly, she worried that these prophetic visions would lead to the Root fully controlling her. That thought, the idea of becoming a weapon to be used to hurt her family, drove her actions. She left her home, her friends, her husband and daughter behind. In doing so, she secluded herself within the city, and used her connection to protect her people from the Root's assaults. This was a devastating blow for Andrew to withstand. Although he understood that Evelyn had made her choice in order to protect him and their daughter, the loss of his wife still took a heavy toll on the old commander. Ever since the Root attacked the planet, Ford held himself at fault for all of the events that came after. He felt responsible for the Root being on Earth, and for all of the death and destruction they had wrought. Without Evelyn at his side, the guilt of his deeds ate at him, turning his mind towards desperation. An obsession started to grow within Ford, one that would drive him to seek out a way to remove the Root from this world. From the journal found within the labyrinth, we have a good picture of his actions following Evelyn's departure. He begins in January of 1993, 1 year after losing Evelyn. Ford uses understanding of the crystals in order to travel to other worlds in search of a way to eradicate the Root. Nadine grew older and more distant of her father as he made long voyages away from his people. She held the belief that his place was with the ward and with her, so that they could survive and live as a family. Ford disagreed, and his fervor drove him ever deeper into the void. It was during one of his expeditions that Ford discovered that he was unable to die. While visiting Rome during August of 1995, Ford lost his life in battle to an Idri. Despite this, he recuperated fully and remained among the living. This was apparently not the first instance of him surviving death, and although he has no real idea of how he is able to do it, he knew that this immortality would serve his purposes in trying to find a cure. In his absence, Nadine took on the role of leader within the ward, she and her husband guiding their people, ensuring their survival. Eventually, Nadine too would create life. In Ford's journal, we learned that it was not until 2011 that he returned to Ward 13 and met his granddaughter, Ellen Ford. Despite the happy occasion, the same argument sparked between him and Nadine. She wanted him to stay, to be with their family and to help their people. Ford believed that he was helping them by doing his work and continuing his search. It's very clear that Andrew faced an inner struggle which tore him and his family apart. Part of him wished to spend time with those he loved while he could. Some part of him knew that it was what Evelyn would have wanted for them. Still, his guilt and desire to create a safe world spurred him to isolation and danger. Ford also found a friend in Navum, a native of Yaesha. Together with her and the slave people, Ford built a revolution within the lush world. This caused him to leave for years at a time now, returning only to find his daughter and granddaughter holding a rigid hostility towards him. He makes a note of using Rom as his place to escape from the chaos, ironic as that may be. During this time, Nadine passed on. In his absence, he had missed the final moments of his daughter's life. After this, his situation grew only more strenuous. Ellen, his granddaughter, was the only one that remained. She held the same stance as her mother. She wanted only for Ford to return and be with her and their people. Still, Ford chased after his obsession, and eventually Ellen too would give up on the old commander. A letter from Nadine, written before her death and delivered to Ford by Ellen, tells us what happened. Nadine was sick, and her time in this world would soon end. Her husband long passed, taken by the Root like so many others. This letter can be found in Ford's hideout, sitting on a table in plain sight. It's not hard to imagine that Andrew Ford sat here during countless nights, reading it and feeling the weight of his actions. His immortality allowed him all the time he would want to pursue his goals. His wife had gone, his daughter had left the world before him, and his granddaughter barely marked him as a stranger. In a way, he had gotten all that he had asked for until now. He finally had the solitude he wanted to pursue his obsession. Ford was alone. He did attempt to mend some of his relationship with Ellen. He abandoned his mission for a cure, going as far as to burn all of his years of research. He would stay for longer periods within the ward. When he felt he was no longer wanted there, he would sleep in his hideout in order to still be near Ellen. but it was clear that the time for reconciliation had passed. Ellen was an older woman now, and the sole leader of Ward 13. With the flames of his mission stamped down, his family all but lost, and his life a never-ending curse, Ford decided that he no longer had a place on Earth. With a final letter pinned by his door, Ford said his goodbyes to the world he had sacrificed everything to try to save. He made a final visit to see Evelyn, who had become the Root Mother. I do not imagine that it was a happy encounter, for we learn later that the Root Mother had kept a close eye on her family during her exile. She had seen her husband fall to pieces under the weight of his own guilt. She had witnessed the growth and eventual death of her own daughter. She would have watched, in silence, and unable to act, as everyone she loved slowly crumbled to nothing. Only Ellen remaining to carry the family name. I cannot say why it is that she gave Ford the way to the labyrinth. Maybe some part of her believed that he would be better off away from Earth. Maybe she had no reason to fight him on the matter. Ford made his way to Yaesha to continue his work with Navun. We learn from Navun that his actions led to a queen taking notice and eventually capturing him and putting him in prison. He was meant to be tortured for information as to what the rebel movements were. And so here, in this dilapidated hole closed off by bars, we find the man who began it all. A legend made flesh, now held together only by the forces which refused to let him die. Andrew Ford, the founder of Ward 13. Speaking with him, we learned that Harsgard was the primary culprit for the root coming into our world. As he speaks with us, it's clear that Ford understands fully the cost of his actions. He is a broken man with nothing left to give. He gives us the keys to enter the Atoll, and with a final word, we leave the old founder behind. We must continue and succeed where Ford failed. Once we leave this place, we can no longer find him. Perhaps he returned to Navun, the flickering sparks of life still burning inside him. He is still alive, and with us on our mission to vanquish the Root, maybe now he can finally find some peace in helping a new world to thrive.